Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special edition of Every Library Live. Today, we're honored to speak with CARRIE Price, a medical librarian who recently served at the National Institute of Health and is the author of Thank You for Your Service to the American Public, a piece published in the 2025 special issue of the Political Librarian. I'm Allison Jennings-Roche, one of the co-editors of this special issue and the Associate Director of Digital Initiatives and Collections at the University of Baltimore. In her article, this powerful firsthand account, CARRIE explores what it means to serve the public through federal librarianship, the devastating personal and professional costs of the Trump administration's purge of civil service workers, and how librarians can contribute to a democratic future. CARRIE's is a timely and urgent story, and one that challenges us all to think what advocacy, neutrality, and public service really mean. CARRIE, we've been friends for a few years, even worked together in previous places. I'm so glad that you were able to bring this piece to this latest issue. So thank you for really, hustling to bring it together. Some lines that I was really struck with in your piece were, I thought it was a heartfelt and resonant piece for the idea that you said the job that I was hired for does not exist anymore. It ceased to exist at noon on January 20th, 2025. And you also said the government is a service provider. It's not a for-profit business, and it most certainly isn't Twitter. So could you tell me more, why did you write this article?
Well, thanks, Allison. I'm so happy to be here. What a privilege this is. So let me tell you a little bit about why I wrote the article and why I felt like it was important to share my story. I knew about the special issue of the Political Librarian coming up, but at the time I was working at the National Institutes of Health. Anyone who's ever been a federal employee knows that there are many, many, many levels of approval and ethics committee things that you have to go through to get your pieces approved to be published. So I knew that the journal was having a special issue. I had no plans on writing for it because I thought it would be too complicated to get done. On February 15th, I was fired and everything changed, and I thought, I can write that article now. I can write for the journal. And so in a matter of days, I wrote the article because your deadline was coming up. And I just wanted to kind of get it off my chest. I also wanted to share my experience because I didn't think that we were really seeing a lot in the news or the media about what federal employees were experiencing at that period in time. And so it was important to me to write my perspective. Went over the draft a couple times, got some feedback from friends and family, and hopefully I was able to convey what it felt like at that specific moment in late February of 2025, to have your career just demolished in an instant. So yeah, that was part of the reason I wrote that.
Thank you for writing it. And, I remember asking you, hey, do you want to contribute? And we had this conversation. I also remember, right, that getting this job at NIH was really just a huge moment for you, right? That was the dream based on your previous career. And up until that moment, we had, again, we've been friends outside of this context. But in your article, you wrote that securing a federal job is no small feat. It carries the expectation of political neutrality no matter who occupies the White House. So in that context, what do you think the public misunderstands about, being a federal librarian, that process, what that really means, and about the neutrality and vulnerability of all federal librarians?
Yeah, it's not easy to get a job in the federal government. You go through a very long application process. You rarely even make it to referral to the hiring manager. Over the years, I had applied in various capacities to federal jobs. And this was the first time that, I made it through. I had started as a medical librarian in 2012 at Johns Hopkins University. And where do you go from, where do you go as a medical librarian? Well, NIH. It was really a dream for me to be a part of that community and to serve the scientific staff and researchers in the 27 institutes and centers of the National Institutes of Health. A lot of people invest in you to bring you on board. There's a lot of training. There's a lot of investment by other staff and onboarding. There's in the onboarding training, they talk extensively about, and you have to take all the onboarding training. There's a lot of it. they talk extensively about security in the government and security risks. They also talk about the Hatch Act, which came about in 1939, which was the expectation of political neutrality as a federal employee, and that federal services would be administered in a nonpartisan fashion. So you weren't allowed to fundraise at work or to wear your political affiliated t-shirts and hats at work. And there were penalties for people who didn't do that, who violated the Hatch Act. And I think with the administration, we've seen that all just completely go out the window. Things feel very political within the federal government. There seems to be favoritism, and trying to think of the right words, but we're not seeing the ethics that we know the government has been so dedicated to in the past. We're not seeing that play out right now.
Absolutely. And we're seeing things being politicized.
I think we lost Allison. I can't see or hear her.
My apologies, everyone. I lost connection for a second there. Huge apologies. Sorry, Carrie, to throw that off. You were talking about how things are being politicized. And I know as a health librarian, you really root what you're doing in the science and what
Right.
serves the community and what's
Right.
necessary. And so part of that is obviously trying to meet the needs of everyone, which now has become things like diversity, equity, inclusion. So you write about that there were emails that mandated reporting of anyone disguising their roles in diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives through coded or imprecise language. How did the tone and tactics of these communications affect morale, the sense of mission to the federal workers around you, and to you yourself?
It was absolutely surreal. It was pretty immediately after January 20th, after the inauguration, that these emails started to come in. The first staff to be cut were the people working in diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And there's that saying that they're coming next for you, right?
Yeah.
So, you know what's coming. You saw them get cut first, and then the probationary staff, of which I was one. And then most recently, we've seen reductions in force just broadly across different agencies. The tone of the emails was absolutely surreal in the sense that it was nothing you would expect from the government, from administrators in the government. And I said it in my article, and I was reading Reddit at the time. I was looking at all the forums. People were reporting those emails as spam because they were so unusual. And I think it's come out since then that they've been written by the young people who were working with Elon Musk in the DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. So yeah, they were just very unprofessional. It was surreal in the sense that you're supposed to rat on your colleagues. Who would do that? Why? It just was unreal, and still is to me. I still, wake up wondering, what is this world we're living in?
Mm-hmm. Could you say a little bit more about that? I feel like some people don't fully grasp the professionalism or the level of training required to be a medical librarian or an NIH librarian. Could you talk just a little bit about what the standards were and how quickly they changed or what you saw? Because I know you weren't in the role that long, right? If we can think
Right.
about the amount of investment in you in that role, in this training and the development and the hiring, and then all of a sudden someone with your years of experience coming into it. Could you just say a little bit more about that just to kind of put it in relief for us?
Yeah, so I can say, again, I started as a medical librarian in 2012, and I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for mentors, managers, bosses, people who invested in me to learn what I wouldn't know half the stuff I know today if it weren't for them. And I always have tried to pay that forward through different means, informal mentorship, helping people out, helping new librarians. Getting to the NIH library, it was sort of like the ultimate dream for me, and we had a lot of work ahead of us. I will say that I had the great pleasure of working with two people I already knew, two friends of mine at the library. So when I came in, I already had worked with one other person and had met one other person through social media. And just the dream of being able to work with like-minded people and to look down the pike and say, we have all this great stuff we're going to do here. We were going to revamp our evidence synthesis service training. I was going to offer some new classes. We were doing new bibliometric services. I was taking training to come up to speed on bibliometrics services. And all of that just came to a grinding halt in normally when you get fired, you have some notice, I guess, or maybe you don't, but it's coming. And here there was just this urgency, like download all your documents because we don't know what's happening. And I did. I got my HR documents. I got my performance reviews. I got, the tax documents, the things that you need when you leave an organization. But it just happened like on a weekend overnight, which was another thing this Doge staff was doing, was all these after hours communications. And in fact, I think they still are. And that kind of goes in with that unprofessionalism. Their government employees are not supposed to be checking their email nights and weekends. That's you're within your realm of duty when you're on duty. Right. And they're sending these late night emails where you're getting fired, or you're supposed to report your coworkers, or so all of our training, all of our expertise went out the window that weekend when I was one of the 8 people who were probationary who were fired. And since then, I've anecdotally heard that there have been more firings, reductions in force, which they are calling RIFs, to other staff within the library. So I'm not sure how many people are left out of 50. I would guess high 20s, low 30s, maybe, of a staff of originally 50 when I started last August. So it's just dreams dashed. All the professional things I had hoped to do with my friends and colleagues, it's gone, and it's gone for them too. And I think that's sad.
I think it is sad. And just for like context for those who aren't in like the DC corridor that we are, probationary is what happens when you're a newly hired federal worker. It doesn't mean you're like on probation and like it might mean in the private sector.
Yes.
It literally is anyone who's newly hired, newly promoted, transferring between agencies. This has been in the news everywhere, but just so we have context. So often what we're talking about are people who are the best and brightest, recently brought on or promoted. Also, could you just explain briefly, what do you mean? What do bibliometrics do for federal science and research and like evidence synthesis? Because I think these things become abstract, but what are we losing when we're losing this level of expertise?
Sure. So bibliometrics, we helped researchers look at their research impact in the field, and that could be by department, by grant. You could look at the money that was associated with a specific grant or set of grants and say, these are the publications that have come out of this funding. This is the difference it has made for people, for health, the health of Americans. Evidence synthesis is considered a high level of evidence-based methodology because normally like a randomized controlled trial looks at one set of participants, but an evidence synthesis project would synthesize the results of many trials. And those are considered to be higher levels of evidence because they carry more weight. And so when people talk about evidence-based medicine or evidence synthesis, what they mean is they're not going off anecdotes, opinions, experiences necessarily. They're going off what the data says, which is how science is supposed to work. And we're seeing that really all kind of disappear because, again, the politicization of agendas, we're losing the science that we have invested decades in at the National Institutes of Health, and not just there, but at the colleges and universities that were recipients of NIH grants. A lot of universities have their bread and butter off of those grants. Meaningful, absolutely meaningful work there. So we're losing a lot, and I don't know that we know what we're losing just yet.
And that's like really poignant. Thank you for pointing that out because that's kind of what I wanted to draw this out, right? Like your role was extremely evidence driven and could even be metrics based, right? Based on what
Mhm.
you've said. And you also had some oversight for federal grants and making sure the research, bibliometrics ultimately tell you results based on what you said,
Mhm.
right? And those kinds of
Mhm.
things that evidence that this is so essential. So when we cut those things, what are we losing? Obviously, we're here talking about libraries, but what are we losing for health and for science and for the workers? Yeah, it's just heartbreaking to think about the loss to the American public based on people's important work.
Mhm.
Along those lines, you make a really, really powerful statement when you say that we, meaning librarians, are the last line of defense against this administration's censorship, propaganda, disinformation, and anti intellectualism. What role do you see for librarians and library workers in resisting these forces going forward?
So that's an excellent question, and I'd like to mention two things that I'm aware of, and I'm sure there may be people here or watching this later who know about more, and I think it's up to us to share that, what we know with others. But there are two information professional groups who have come to the forefront in making the Data Rescue Project, datarescueproject.org, and the Public Environmental Data Partners. So that what they have done has been to try to rescue, save, and scrape data from government databases before they were wiped, before, February, March,
Mhm.
January. So we do still have that data archived in different places, and a lot of that work has been done by librarians. So I'm really proud of that. I can't say that it's been done by me. It hasn't been done by me. But I am proud of that our profession is at the forefront there. Um, and I think that anyone who would have watched your talk last week, Gender, Politics in the Public Library, might have other ideas about, um, what librarians are doing in the sphere in right now in this political climate. You talked a lot about advocacy for our communities, but also advocacy for ourselves. And I think that's really important here. Um, we're at a point where I think maybe, and I have never worked in a public library, but I imagine a lot of public librarians are feeling pretty burned out right now. So, um, you know, compassion, empathy, advocacy, and the skills that we have to do our jobs are the skills that we can use to educate um, our children, our families, our friends. We are not we, everyone is fighting the campaign against pseudoscience, mis and disinformation, and it's never-ending torrent. So,
It's never ending, but we all have our piece to play, right? Like I'm grateful for these librarians doing data rescue project. That's absolutely not me either, right? Like we all have ways that we can pull those pieces of our expertise. And thank you for like highlighting ones that I don't think have been highlighted so far in the series. So that's
Mhm.
really helpful. So people can see themselves and see places for them to kind of jump into this work, to this greater attempting to save, information and access for all. Absolutely. Thank you,
Mhm.
Carrie. And thank you for writing this article and giving us this opportunity to talk about this and keep talking about this. And people will be able to refer back to this.
Mhm.
What do you think, or what do you see? What are we doing or not doing as a profession to protect early career librarians from political backlash or retaliation? Do you think librarians are doing enough to push back against political interference in our institution? From what you've seen, for sure, or your opinion?
I think we're all trying. I think a lot of us are trying. There's definitely a sense of community. A lot of us have left, formerly Twitter for Blue Sky, um, LinkedIn to sort of network with other people in the field, in the profession. I talked a little bit at the beginning about formal and informal mentorship for new librarians. That's so important. I think it's crucial to make sure that when people need to speak up, they are heard and recognized. I know I've seen things where I've seen workplaces where when new librarians speak up, they're like, okay, that's great, but then nothing happens. So we need to give new librarians all the tools they need to become, to use their strengths and to become the professionals they are going to be.
Yeah. Thank you. And I totally agree. And not always reinvent the wheel. Just a small shout out. I know, Carrie, you have an excellent YouTube channel. That's a great resource for early career librarians looking particularly in things in your area of expertise. So thank you for the work you're doing there and continuing to do and share publicly, because I know it's an incredible resource, whether that's political or not, right? Ultimately, right now, everything we're doing is political, and it's important to protect
Sure.
our work in the health information. So thank you for that. Do you have any final thoughts, things that we haven't been able to talk about so far in this conversation?
I do. So a couple things I wanted to mention. Thank you for bringing up the YouTube channel. Like I said, I wouldn't be where I am today if it weren't for the mentors who mentored me. And that was my way of mentoring other people. I know that when I was starting out, I had a million questions. And my YouTube channel was meant to answer those questions for people who don't want to go, bug somebody, or maybe don't have somebody to bug. So that's what I did. A lot of it's about PubMed. What's the future of PubMed look like? Someone, I think it was Hilda Bastian, wrote an article about what might happen to PubMed. And I can probably find that and link to that later. That's a product of the National Library of Medicine, which I'll mention is different than the NIH library. So NLM serves the public through outreach engagement and products like PubMed and Medline Plus. But the NIH library where I worked, we worked with the scientific staff and researchers of the institutes and centers of the NIH. Another thing that has struck me recently, so I love to search in PubMed, and one of the ways that literature is indexed in PubMed is with MESH, medical subject headings. There are new headings released every year, and I remember in 2023, there was a new medical subject heading called brain drain. And I thought, what's brain drain? That's not something I've heard of before. And what it is talking about is highly skilled, highly sought after, skilled professional workers leaving their countries for other countries. And while in 2023, that concept was not something I thought I had to worry about, I now see exactly what it means to have brain drain. And we're seeing that as more and more scientists and experts are fired from our federal institutions. So, like I said, we don't know what we've lost, but I think we will soon see what we've lost. And I do think that there's brain drain happening right now in the United States.
Wow, that's horrifying to think about, for sure. What are we losing as a country? Not only as a field or for science. Thank you for pointing that out. We're losing so many skilled federal workers, science, libraries, everything.
Yeah.
Carrie, thank you so much for your honesty, your courage, your commitment to public service, both before and after. This is still a public service. So thank you for being here. Your story really reminds us that neutrality without defense is surrender, and that libraries, even in the most technical and research-intensive roles, are stewards of democratic values. To our audience, please share in this conversation, continue it in your own institutions, and consider how we can collectively support those who are being silenced. You can read Carrie's article and the whole special issue for free in our open access journal at thepoliticallibrarian.org. This has been EveryLibrary Live. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Carrie.
Thank you so much.